big news broke out this past week with Vergil Ortiz and Golden Boy. Vergil Ortiz is officially suing Golden Boy, seeking to void and terminate his contract with the promotion that he's been with since his professional debut back in 2016. A big shock. A lot of people didn't really see it coming, and there's been some back and forth featuring Vergil Ortiz's manager as well as Oscar De La Hoya. Thoughts about this situation?
Yeah, I think it's about time. You know, Vergil Ortiz, I think he outgrew Golden Boy Promotions and more specifically Oscar De La Hoya. I've never been a very big fan of De La Hoya as a promoter. You know, I think he definitely brings a lot of eyeballs to himself, but sometimes he picks favorites. Sometimes he's more focused on making himself the spectacle instead of making his fighters the spectacle. And I think that one of the biggest reasons why Vergil Ortiz and Boots Ennis haven't gotten into the ring is because of Oscar De La Hoya. So, you know, I'm happy for Vergil Ortiz, and I hope that the judge rules in favor of him.
Yeah. Look, we're talking about 2026. You know, we're talking about modern boxing. We're talking about boxing right now. It's very unfortunate that we have, you know, these two megastars, these two elite fighters within a single weight class, you know, the super welterweight, you know what I'm saying? These are guys that, both of these guys, you know, Boots Ennis and Vergil Ortiz, you know, they both fought at 147. They moved up to 154. And, you know, I think another reason why that this whole fiasco has, you know, gone very much mainstream is because without a championship belt on the line is because we understand boxing as a whole is that these guys are the very elite, the very top, the very best, you know, the cream of the crop. And it's very unfortunate that, you know, within modern boxing is the fact that we have managers, we have promoters that, you know, want to take the spotlight out of the fighters. We have guys that, you know, maybe they were great in their heyday, but now, you know, they still want to keep the spotlight on themselves. So it's very unfortunate that, you know, we have certain people that, you know, restrict or they put a little bit of a barricade for these mega fights.
Absolutely, and then that's totally Oscar De La Hoya. You know, he was a fantastic boxer. Don't get me wrong. Like, he was a great, one of the greats of all time, right? And he deserves the respect as a boxer. But when he went into the promoter side, I mean, yeah, he makes a couple of good fights, and he looks after his cash cows. You know, he looks after Ryan Garcia, who, after losing to Rolly Romero for a world title, somehow he's fighting Mario Barrios for a world title now in his next fight. But Vergil Ortiz, he gets thrown out to the side, and you know, he's been at the 154 division for a very long time now. He's fought a ton of dangerous, hard opponents. Some of the top guys at 154. Former champion Israel Madrimov, Sergey Bohachuk. And still, he's not a world champion. And I think a lot of the boxing casuals, you know, they look at Vergil Ortiz and, you know, maybe some of the real hardcore fans, we give him a lot of respect like us because Vergil Ortiz, I think he is probably the best fighter at 154. But some of the casuals, they look at him. Excuse me. Some of the casuals look at Vergil Ortiz and they say, oh, he doesn't even have a world championship. How is he that good? And it's like, I kind of feel bad for Vergil Ortiz. I think he's long overdue for a title shot at 154, and I think the biggest barricade that he's had is Oscar De La Hoya. So, you know, I think it was a great move by Vergil Ortiz because he's been asking for that Vergil Ortiz fight, and it's been heavily rumored. They've been negotiating for a couple of months, and nothing has happened. And I think that is Oscar De La Hoya, I believe, is at fault.
Yo, I think it's very funny. No, maybe not very funny, but I think it's very easily, you know, I think a lot of people are easy to point the finger to, you know, people like Oscar De La Hoya, Vergil Ortiz's manager, you know, Rick. But I think when it comes to like really mega fights, you know, there's definitely more than two parties. You know, I think a lot of people like to see, you know, Team Ortiz against Team Boots or Team Boots against Team Ortiz. But to be honest, we're dealing with like 2 to 4 different parties. We're dealing with the management. We're dealing with managers. We're dealing with promotions. We're dealing with network deals, and we're talking about modern boxing. So everybody wants to get their big slice of the pie. Once this fight is actually made, and at the end of the day, it's really just about money, because then it goes back to what's the split. You know what I'm saying? If one party isn't happy with the split, then everything can be to the liking of both fighters. But when the split isn't what one fighter wants, then it becomes a little bit more of a hurdle to overcome.
I guarantee you, because you're right that the split is very important, but I guarantee you that the person that's probably in Vergil Ortiz's corner saying, "Hey, we can get more. Hey, you're the A side. You should get all the accommodations in this contract against Boots Ennis." Guarantee you it's Oscar De La Hoya. Because I think, listen, Boots Ennis is with Matchroom, so he's with Eddie Hearn. Eddie Hearn is a fantastic promoter. Fantastic. Yeah, I think he's one of the best promoters right now in modern day boxing. And I feel like he always looks out for his fighters. He's...
Yeah, I mean, look what happened with Dalton Smith. 1 week ago, we saw a guy that was a nobody become somebody. Possibly even the boogeyman of a weight class.
Yeah, absolutely. And he got him that Suriel Matias fight. He made him the number 1 contender. He went the right way, and he was able to get him his first title shot, and now everyone's talking about Dalton Smith. I think Eddie Hearn is totally fine, and even Boots Ennis is totally fine with taking maybe even a little bit less of the split. Honestly, I think Vergil Ortiz is as well. I think if both of these fighters, Vergil and Ennis, they don't really care if it's 45 to 55, whichever way. But who really cares is Oscar De La Hoya. And I think he's one of the biggest leeches, I think, in modern day boxing. And I think he's the one that's keeping us from watching one of the biggest mega fights in modern day boxing.
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, like what I said, it's very easy to pick and choose, point the finger. It's this fighter or this management. It's this guy that's, stopping us, as a boxing whole, as a boxing fanatic, to watch the biggest and best, fights in modern day boxing. But I mean, you can't get it twisted. Everybody wants money. Everybody wants money. You compared Vergil Ortiz and Ryan Garcia. Both of them, as of this moment in time, they're both managed underneath the same boxing promotion. We can nitpick and choose. Ryan Garcia, after a loss, is fighting for a world championship title fight. The decision is overturned against Devin Haney and Ryan Garcia. But he still is able to fight for another world title. Rolly Romero, and then he loses, and then he's still able to fight for another world title. And we're talking about modern day boxing. Ryan Garcia is able to pull numbers. Ryan Garcia can do little side quests and still be able to pull the numbers, required for him to, not only break even, but, make a profit, for his company, make a profit for whatever event, for, whenever he fights. And, unfortunately, Vergil Ortiz is not that guy. You know what I'm saying? When you think about Ryan Garcia, you think about a guy who is able to pull casual people to tune in and watch his fights. Vergil Ortiz is the opposite, He's not a guy who is very outspoken. He's not outgoing. He's not a guy who is able to, have some type of personality within the internet. But he's a guy that's going to knock your head off. And, he's just a typical boxer. He's a guy who stays silent outside of the ring, but inside of the ring, he makes a lot of noise. And, that's a double-edged sword. When you're so great at your craft that nobody wants to fight you, but then you're not, outspoken, or you haven't broken into the mainstream, then, it's a little bit of a, you're shooting yourself in the foot type of situation.
Yeah, why are you defending Oscar De La Hoya, bro? You like those photos that that came out back in the day, or what?
Well, also, one of the big things that they keep saying about De La Hoya as well is that his relationship among the other promoters, among the other people, within the boxing scene is very strained. You know, you see De La Hoya when he was doing his Clapback Thursdays, De La Hoya when he go on his rants, often critiquing the fighters, often critiquing the promoters. I mean, he and Eddie Hearn absolutely despise each other. And a lot of it comes from Oscar De La Hoya. Of course, some of it does come from Eddie Hearn. But, I mean, I personally, from what I've always see, is De La Hoya instigating the situation and the beef between him and Eddie Hearn. And I mean, De La Hoya came out and said that he wanted a 60-40 split in favor of Vergil Ortiz for the Boots fight, in which he gave Eddie Hearn and Boots a deadline to accept. They didn't accept, of course, to the deadline. De La Hoya said, "Oh, we're moving on, this and that." Like, come on, like, you know for sure, Vergil Ortiz. You look at his resume. You look at the fights he's taken over this past 2-3 years. You know, since his move up to 154, he's a man who's not afraid of anyone. He's willing to go and engage and fight. So for De La Hoya to be saying, "Oh, we're moving on," when Vergil Ortiz himself has stated that he wants to take the Boots fight, he wants that fight next, it's kind of disrespectful towards what Vergil Ortiz wants. So it definitely pulled a big strain. I think back in, when they did the face-off after Vergil beat Lubin, everyone was all like, this fight has to happen next. There's been talks, negotiations, but I mean, nothing seems to be coming out of it. And that's one of the big reasons as well. One of the reasons for why Vergil is suing. He's suing for breach of contract, of course, and interference with prospective economic advantage, more notably the Boots Ennis negotiations that aren't being able to, come out with anything positive because of what Vergil Ortiz is allegedly claiming that Golden Boy and Oscar De La Hoya have been hindering the progress for this mega fight. So it's definitely very interesting to see. There's a lot of factors in it, and I think the big one is the fact that Vergil himself got the same attorney that represented Canelo back in 2020 when Canelo wanted to leave Golden Boy. So it's very interesting to see Vergil go this route. He wants to become a free agent. And I think it'd be interesting to see whether or not he's able to get out of the contract.
Yeah, I mean, it's like what I said. It's very easy to point to like a certain person, and unfortunately or unfortunately, with Oscar's situation, it seems as though there's a lot of business associates that don't look too highly upon him, and that's because of his own fault. But when there's a problem like this, and it seems to be not looking very favorable as if this fight is going to be made. I know we just, we kind of like talked about the business side, but do you guys think any of these two fighters, Jaron Ennis or Vergil Ortiz, are ducking each other? Or do you guys truly think it's really just business? Like, it's not that these guys don't want to fight each other, but it's just strictly because the name of the game and business that we're not able to see this fight.
It's completely business. What are you talking? I think, bro, Vergil Ortiz is one of these old school type of fighters. He's gonna fight anybody, and whoever is opposite him, he's gonna try to knock his head off. Same thing with Boots Ennis. Ennis is a monster. He's a machine. He became a world champion at 147, moved up to 154, and he wants to become a champion. And I think he has a great promoter by his side, Eddie Hearn, as well. So I think nothing is stopping these guys from wanting to fight each other. The only thing is the business side. When the managers get in, when the promotions get in, when the networks get in. And so that's the only reason why. That's why people hate on modern day boxing, because it becomes so complicated. Everyone wants to be the A side. Everyone has to get the biggest split. They got to walk out second. They got to sing the anthems. You know what I'm saying? Like a bunch of dumb stuff that true boxing fans don't really care about. I don't care whose name is first in Ortiz versus Ennis or Ennis versus Ortiz. I don't care about that stuff. But the promoters are going to try to do their best to try to make their fighter be first on the pay-per-view. And then that takes away from the fight, because that makes the negotiations a lot more complicated. So you cannot blame this. You cannot blame the negotiations on Ennis or on Vergil Ortiz. I think it is the managers and the promotions.
Yeah, we'll definitely see what comes out of this whole entire situation between Vergil Ortiz and Golden Boy Promotions. It barely started, this whole process. So hopefully within a couple months' time, we're able to get a clear answer as to whether or not Vergil Ortiz will be becoming a free agent or not. And if he is, then that makes the Boots fight more possible than it's ever been, more likely. So I'm very interested to see the outcome of this whole situation.
Yeah, but in regards to my question, what do you think?
I don't think they're ducking.
No?
No, I agree with Asa. I don't think they're ducking. I've always said it. Vergil Ortiz has always been fighting these tough guys ever since he came into the 154 back to back to back. So he's not ducking at all. People who say he's ducking this and that, I don't believe it. But
yeah, the people who were saying that, do you think they're dick riding Ennis?
bro, they can dick ride whoever.
Oh.
Neither fighter, Boots or Vergil, are ducking each other. They clearly want to fight next. So now's the time to make it, and I'm hoping that we can hopefully get this fight either midway through the year or sometime in the fall of 2026.
Yeah, I think for me, look, I just want to say, as a fighter, they both of these fighters don't seem to be ducking. I think, a lot of these people, both fighters have maybe made decisions in the past that maybe, a lot of these fans like to nitpick. He didn't want to fight this guy. When Norman Jr. and Senior were trying to push for this Ennis fight, they were like, oh, they ducked us, and we just barely became world champion. And I think a lot of people ran with that narrative. But no, I think Ennis is a guy who is ready for the smoke. I think he's one of those fighters that, you tell him, hey, this guy is like super good. He's the elite. You should probably avoid him. And I think that really encourages him to like want to stride past that, and face that opposition. And Vergil Ortiz, he's a guy that, like what I said, he's not very charismatic. He's not very outgoing. He's not very outspoken outside of the ring. But, inside of the ring, he's able to bang. When he fought these two Eastern European fighters, Bohacek, Madrimov, these are guys who, within that weight class are super dangerous. Nobody wants to fight them. And then, Vergil Ortiz is a guy who, doesn't have that much, publicity or doesn't have that much fans, backing him up. But yeah, he was still able to, put that reputation on the line and come out victorious, and, that just shows you like there's no bitch in him. And I don't think there's no bitch in Jaron Ennis. And so, these are two guys that are, within their prime. We're talking about prime years. And so, it's very unfortunate that we're not able to see this fight because of the business side.
Yeah, I want to talk about what you said about Ortiz being a little bit, he's not the cream of the crop, right? He's not very popular, right? He's not a very popular guy. Like, let's say Ryan Garcia. If I was De La Hoya, I'd probably, favor Ryan Garcia a little bit more because he does bring a lot more eyes to his events, to his fights. At the same time, as boxing fans and even as boxers, we want to see the best. We don't care about who has the most clout, who has the most following, I want to see the best fight the best. And I think Vergil Ortiz is the best at 154. So I want to see him fight Boots Ennis. I want to see that fight. And maybe, it might not be the biggest or flashiest fight for De La Hoya, but I think as a boxing promoter, he has an obligation to make this fight. I think he knows what boxing is all about because he used to be a boxer. So he knows that the best have to fight the best at the end of the day. And he has to make the investment on Vergil Ortiz Jr. He has to really believe in him that he can win. He can become a world champion. He maybe even go undisputed. And imagine that. He invests in him right now when maybe he's not the biggest name. But when you become undisputed champion, guess what? They're going to know your name. You know, everyone is going to start to know your name. You're going to begin to build a following. So I really do think De La Hoya has an obligation to start investing a lot more money in Vergil Ortiz, because I really do think he can be a star.
Yeah, I think when it comes to like situations like this, you have to almost choose legacy. You have to almost choose the decision or the outcome over money. Money is always gonna follow you if you're the best. If you are the truly the cream of the crop, but you're not getting compensated for that, eventually it's gonna catch up, and it's gonna what's that saying? It's all gonna be worth it. It's very interesting to see that, Oscar De La Hoya wants the majority of the purse, for Ortiz, Team Ortiz, and eventually, Oscar De La Hoya and GoldenboyPromotions. So to me, it almost seems as though it's like, Ortiz, he got Ortiz this far. Now it's, now he's cashing in, and it's kind of very unfortunate, but, yeah, I mean, look, I said it in a few episodes ago. I don't think this fight is going to get made until there's a title. It could be one or two, but at least, there has to be a title on the line for these two fighters to fight. These guys are literally the cream of the crop. These guys, fought at 147. Now they've barely moved up to 154, and we have old fighters like Charlo trying to fight either of these two guys. We have the whole division trying to fight. Wanting to get inside the ring, either into with either of these two fighters. So, I don't think we're gonna see this fight until there's a belt on the line, but as of right now, it's what I said. There's a lot of hurdles. There's no belt. Each team wants more money, and unfortunately, we also have managers that want to get a piece of the pie. And unfortunately, I don't think we're going to see this fight until like maybe a year or two from now.
Well, we'll see whether or not that comes to fruition. Of course, we'll have to wait for the answer to this entire Vergil Ortiz versus Golden Boy case. But speaking about best against the best, we move down to the 135 to see some of the top contenders and current champion for the IBF, featuring Raymond Morataya taking on former Olympian Andy Cruz.